Chapter 81 The Future is Still the Present. Please subscribe. You are listening at novelfold.audio. Speaking of scientific research awards, Arthur instantly thought of the Nobel Prize, which would be very famous in later generations, covering awards in physics, medicine, chemistry, literature, and peace. It is one of the most authoritative and international scientific research awards in later generations. If Arthur remembers correctly, the Nobel Prize, which will be famous in later generations, should be officially awarded this year, that is, in 1901, although it is not clear exactly when. It can be concluded from the reaction of the European scientific research community that the Nobel Prize has not been awarded so far. If Arthur had acted quickly, he might not have been able to create and award his own award before the first Nobel Prize was awarded, replacing the status of the Nobel Prize in later generations. The Nobel Prize was created according to the will of the famous Swedish chemist, Alfred Bernhard Nobel. Nobel used most of his inheritance to establish the Nobel Prize. This fund is worth about £2 million. In this era when the per capita annual income in Europe is only a few dozen pounds, this fund is of great benefit to everyone. It's a huge sum of money. This is why the Nobel Prize has quickly become one of the most prestigious awards in the world's scientific research community. Even the winner of the first Nobel Prize could receive a bonus worth 20 years' salary of a senior Swedish professor at that time, which was at least 150,000 Swedish kronor. If you win one award, you can get at least 20 years of salary. Any normal person will be excited, let alone those scientists who are troubled by the financial chain. Any specific plans? Arthur asked. Creating awards is definitely an effective method, especially when the major awards in later generations are not established and famous, as long as you can invest a large amount of money and carry out large-scale publicity in Europe. The newly established award will definitely become a sought-after award throughout the European scientific research community in a short period of time. Your Highness, our purpose is to attract people to Australia, and Australia currently has a shortage of talents in all aspects. Therefore, my suggestion is that we cannot just focus on the scientific research community. Research in other areas as long as it is useful to the country is also eligible to receive awards. We create a more authoritative and orthodox award, and then subdivide it into many small awards in various aspects. It will be issued annually or every 6 months to reward all contributors around the world. Hunter Stewart he smiled and said, "Believe me, Your Highness. As long as people know that the prize money of the award is higher than their lifetime salary, even an idiot can come up with something. No one would turn down a large sum of money that they would never earn in their lifetime. Even those scientists who only know about scientific research will worry about insufficient research funds, so they will be tempted by this funding. What's more, once the newly established awards become famous and authoritative around the world, the fame that comes with winning the awards will be a temptation that no one can refuse. The double harvest of fame and fortune is an invincible temptation that no one in the world can refuse. According to the current per capita income in Europe, most civilians have an annual income of less than £50. Professors and scientists who have made some achievements in scientific research also have annual incomes of hundreds to £1,000. Only those who are particularly capable, or who have founded their own companies to achieve revenue, can increase their annual income to more than £1,000. That's a good proposal, Butler Hunter. If I fully support it, when will the earliest official announcement of the awards begin? Arthur nodded and asked with satisfaction. Your Highness, Australia is too far away from Europe. It is conservatively estimated that our award will not be officially awarded until at least half a year, that is, around October. Butler Hunter estimated for a while and replied, half a year is actually not that long. After all, the shortest voyage between Australia and Europe is only 1 month. However, establishing the award in Australia also has a significant disadvantage, that is, because it is too far away from Europe, it is difficult to cause a sensation throughout Europe. Butler Hunter, how about we create an award in Europe first? By creating an award in Europe, we can receive applications from scientists faster, and it will cause a stronger sensation in the European scientific research community. When we establish the award in after Europe has gained a certain prestige and authority, we are moving the award review body to Australia. Arthur asked with a smile, after all, Europe is now the center of the world. If a newly established award wants to quickly gain authority, fame and recognition from others, then establishing it in Europe is a good choice. Australia is still a wild land in the eyes of Europe, and awards created in Australia are at a disadvantage compared to European awards, even if Arthur offers a more generous financial award than other awards. It will not be easy to gain recognition from the entire European scientific research community. But creating it first in Europe is different. European awards will be recognized by Europeans, and huge financial awards will accelerate progress. After the award created by Arthur became an authoritative award recognized by the scientific research community around the world, even if this award was established in savage Africa, it would still be the most authoritative award. This is just like the capitalists of later generations who tried their best to cater to the public during the stage of seizing the market, even if they lost their own interests. After successfully occupying the market and becoming the dominant player in a certain industry, he will have the final say in the entire market. Even if all the previous losses are recovered by then, no one will say no. Because those who are qualified to say no have already died in the process of occupying the market, and the rest can only accept it. Establishing it in Europe will quickly enhance the reputation of the awards we have established, and Europeans will also recognize our awards more. But our plan to quickly enhance Australia's status in the minds of scientists has come to nothing. We want to make those. I'm afraid it will take several years for scientists to immigrate to Australia on their own. Butler Hunter frowned and replied, "This is a problem where you can't have your cake and eat it too." It is a difficult choice whether to quickly increase the recognition of the award in the minds of Europeans or to immediately take advantage of the benefits that the award can bring to Australia and attract more scientist immigrants to Australia, because the first option may not be unable to realize the benefits of the second option. But the disadvantage is that you have to wait longer. Australia is now in the golden stage of development. Any time wasted will be a heavy loss for Australia. It doesn't matter, Butler Hunter. We have to take a longer-term view. Although in the short term, establishing the award in Australia is more conducive to Australia's immigration attraction plan. But it is different to establish the award in Europe and then move there. Can the same purpose be achieved? The changes that a recognized award can bring to Australia are definitely not the ones that can be brought about by a hastily established award. What we need is a large number of immigrants over a long period of time, not a few in a short period of time. Immigrate, isn't it? Arthur said with a smile as he made his final decision. Second update, please support. I still feel a little uncomfortable and don't know what's going on. I will try my best to write another chapter. Please support me. Chapter 82 Heading to Australian New Guinea, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. April 19, 1901, Arthur, who had rested for a few days, was busy again. This time the destination was New Guinea in the north of Australia, which is now Australian New Guinea. This is the first time Arthur has visited and inspected the New Guinea colony since it was taken over by Australia. It's not that Arthur doesn't value this land, it's just that there are too many busy things in Australia, so Arthur has no time to manage this land. The total population of Australian New Guinea is less than 1 million, and the vast majority are indigenous to the island. Most of the indigenous people on these islands live in isolated tribes, maintaining their own unique customs and rarely communicating with the outside world. This has also led to the birth of many taboo cultures in this land, such as cannibals, terrifying existences that make people turn to death. If we only look at population and economy, then the importance of this land is greatly reduced, and there is almost no development potential. However, the island's rich mineral resources and superior geographical location made up for this gap, making New Guinea a treasure land that the British Empire, the German Empire and the Dutch colonists competed for. After the control of British New Guinea was handed over to Australia, the tripartite posture reappeared on this land. The west was controlled by the Netherlands East Indies colony of the Netherlands, and the northeast was controlled by the New Guinea colony of the German Empire. The southeast is naturally the Australian New Guinea colony controlled by Australia. The reason why Arthur agreed to maintain the status of New Guinea as a colony was because the land of New Guinea was indeed more suitable to continue as a colony. Judging from the population size, although it has a population of more than 900,000, the vast majority are local indigenous people, and there are less than 10,000 European immigrants. These indigenous people are all independent tribes that are difficult to assimilate. Although they are not enough to pose a threat to Australia's rule, their taboo culture is definitely not something Australia can change. At the port, Arthur was greeted by the first governor of Australian New Guinea, Aníbal Enrique Hernández. Aníbal Enrique Hernández was one of the talents left to Arthur by Duke Arthur. After being appointed as the governor of New Guinea, he has been working conscientiously without any signs of letting himself go. In Australian New Guinea, which is far away from the country, as the governor with the greatest power, Aníbal Enrique Hernández's performance naturally gained Arthur's trust. When we set foot at the port, most of the staff of the governor's mansion were basically present. Everyone was looking forward to Arthur, but at the same time they were a little uneasy in their hearts. Some of the officials in the government house are the remnants of the original British New Guinea. Most of them chose to make their homes in this land and have become real immigrants and residents of this land. After Australia takes control of this land, they can only choose to continue to accept Australian rule and become Australians. Skipping the welcome ceremony, Arthur led people directly to the governor's mansion. The purpose of this visit was to inspect the work in Australian New Guinea, and also to formulate plans for Australia's industrial development. Although the indigenous people of Australian New Guinea have shortcomings of one kind or another, they are all useful in participating in Australia's industrial development. Before the Netherlands agreed to sell Aboriginal people to Australia, these New Guineans were the best hard labourers for Australia's industrial development. Governor Aníbal, you must be aware of the purpose of my visit this time, right? In the governor's mansion, Arthur looked at Governor Aníbal Enrique Hernández and asked with a smile. Yes, Your Highness. Governor Aníbal nodded and replied respectfully. Approximately how many indigenous people are there in the entire New Guinea colony? How many are able to go to Australia and work for Australia? Seeing Governor Aníbal's affirmative answer, Arthur nodded with satisfaction and continued to ask. Your Highness, there are too many isolated and independent tribes in this land. We are not sure about the population of these tribes. If we only count the tribes that have been in contact with us, then there are about 800,000 people in the entire Australian New Guinea. Above the indigenous people, Governor Aníbal Enrique Hernández blurted out. Seeing that Aníbal Enrique Hernández clearly stated the population of the entire Australian New Guinea, Arthur nodded with satisfaction again and asked, What do you think of the government's plan? Is it possible to transport Aboriginal people from New Guinea to Australia to work? Any country that wants to transform from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy must go through a bloody and cruel process of oppression, whether it is oppressing the people at home or choosing to exploit from the colonies. In short, this process is impossible to avoid. The plan of Arthur and the Australian government is to purchase as many indigenous people as possible from the colonies and abroad, so that this group of indigenous people can replace the Australians and make life contributions to Australia's industrial development. Although it may not seem so humane, it is obviously much better to let the already scarce and precious Australians risk their lives to develop industry than to oppress Australians. Your Highness, I think this can be done, and Australia does need the contribution of these indigenous people. But doing so will also cause panic and anger among these indigenous people. If we want to continue to maintain the stability of New Guinea, then my suggestion is to eradicate as much as possible and use this opportunity to completely eliminate all New Guinea's indigenous people. Otherwise, the hatred of exploitation and oppression will only accumulate over time, and keeping these indigenous people will not be good for the stability of New Guinea. Governor Aníbal Enrique Hernández thought for a while before speaking solemnly. There was a little bit of anxiety when he spoke, obviously because he was worried that his words would offend Arthur. The strategy proposed by Governor Aníbal Enrique Hernández is more bloody than the Australian government's plan, but if you think about it carefully, there is nothing wrong with what Governor Aníbal Enrique Hernández said. The indigenous people of New Guinea and the Australians are two ethnic groups that cannot be reconciled, and it is absolutely impossible for Arthur to accommodate the indigenous people of New Guinea. Under such a premise, since we choose to oppress and enslave these indigenous people, it is better to do it to the extreme. After using all the value of these indigenous people, directly eradicate them to avoid future troubles. After all, Australia needs stability, and only dead people will not resist. Third update, completed. From now on we will do 3 updates in general, please support me. Chapter 83 The Birth of Practical Cars, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You are right, Governor Annibal. Historical experience tells us that we must not be too kind to these indigenous people. As the saying goes, people who are not our race must have different intentions. Under the big goal of Australia's rise, even if we sacrifice everything, the indigenous people of New Guinea will not hesitate. Arthur was silent for a while, and then replied firmly. Seeing that Arthur agreed with his point of view, Governor Annibal Enrique Hernandez felt happy and quickly continued, Your Highness, please don't worry, as long as you give me an army of 2,000 people, I promise all Aboriginal people in New Guinea will become the strongest driving force for Australia's development. Having made his decision in his heart, Arthur no longer hesitated. Looking at Governor Annibal, who was eager to try, Arthur smiled and said, Governor Annibal, I will allocate an army of 2,000 people to you. The requirement is to provide at least 10,000 indigenous people to Australia every month, and New Zealand Guinea's mineral development cannot be interfered with in any way. Can this be done? I'm happy to oblige. Governor Annibal immediately stood up respectfully, his firm eyes and tone representing his attitude. After receiving a positive answer from Governor Annibal, Arthur nodded with great satisfaction and ended the discussion. How to implement the plan after that is what Governor Annibal should have a headache for. Arthur is only responsible for promulgating the plan. Afterwards, accompanied by a series of colonial officials such as Governor Annibal, Arthur inspected New Guinea's garrisons, mines, government and cities, and delivered some speeches in the city square. It has to be said that New Guinea's geographical location and resources have infinitely increased the value of this land. Australian New Guinea is also very rich in mineral resources. The minerals that have been discovered include gold, copper, silver, lead, nickel, oil and natural gas, and a series of important mineral resources, and the reserves are very rich, because to the west is the Dutch East Indies colony of the Netherlands. It is also a springboard for planning and layout in Southeast Asia, and it is also Australia's natural northern barrier. More importantly, compared to New Zealand, which is relatively far away from Australia, New Guinea is not far from Australia. Or even very close. As the second largest region in Oceania, after mastering Australia and New Guinea, it has basically mastered the entire Oceania. After inspecting the entire New Guinea, Arthur encouraged all the colonial officials, and then returned to Australia on a warship under the eyes of everyone's respect. This trip to New Guinea still brought a piece of good news. At least until there is no movement from the Netherlands, Australia can still rely on the indigenous people of New Guinea to achieve rapid development of early-stage industry, although the interests of these indigenous people may have to be sacrificed for this, and the vast majority of the indigenous people may even shed their blood and sacrifice, but who cares? The history of the industrial rise of European countries is also the history of the exploitation of colonies around the world. Everyone will only remember the current prosperity of Europe, and no one will have mercy on the exploited peoples. As the saying goes, if you fall behind, you will be beaten. In order for Australia to become world-class, we can only endure the pain and let other nations make sacrifices. May 3, 1901, Sydney. Arthur, who had only been back in Sydney for a few days, soon set off for a piece of good news. The news was revealed by Benz. After requisitioning several factory buildings near Sydney, Benz and Diesel quickly established their laboratories and factories and invested in the research and production of engines and automobiles. Diesel has the latest engine he has researched, and Benz also has his own car research results. The two hit it off and decided to develop the most advanced car in the world and let him become Arthur's car. Of course, this is actually the two of them showing their abilities to Arthur. After all, after arriving in Australia, the two of them needed to rely on Arthur to provide all their research funds. Demonstrating your abilities to Arthur appropriately will make it easier to request research funds in the future. 3 months later, on May 3, the two finally worked overtime to develop a new car, and couldn't wait to ask Arthur to come and visit it in person. To be honest, Arthur was a little shocked when he first saw the car developed by Benz and Diesel, although compared to various advanced performance cars in later generations, the car invented by the two looked very simple. But after being brought into the current situation of automobile development in this era, I have to admire Benz, the father of the automobile, and Diesel, the father of the diesel engine. This unnamed car was modified based on the Victor Dea car developed by Benz. In terms of engine, the diesel engine developed by Diesel is used, which has greatly improved the power of the car, in theory. The car can reach a top speed of 80 km per hour, more importantly, because it uses the diesel engine invented by Benz, this car can use many unexpected energy sources. In addition to the more traditional gasoline and diesel, peanut oil, olive oil and other unexpected energy sources vocabulary can also be used as the energy source of this car. Unlike the common car designs of later generations, the steering wheel of this car is installed in the middle of the car. In addition to the main driving position, there are 3 seats in the back row. According to the eyes of this era, this is almost the most advanced car in the world. Benz's engine ensures the stability of the car. Although the noise of engine operation cannot be avoided, a car that can travel more than 200 km at a speed of 30 to 40 km per hour is definitely something to look forward to. Mr. Benz, Mr. Diesel, is this thing really the result of your 3 months' work? I think it can be put into the market with a little improvement, and it will definitely arouse the popularity of everyone. Arthur said in surprise. The two said, although it is far inferior to later generations of cars in terms of performance and design, in terms of practicality, it is completely ready for market use. This was what shocked Arthur. In terms of performance, this car is not inferior to the Model T that was born a few years later. This is a practical car that can fully open up the automobile market. To be precise, it is a car that has been improved based on our previous research results, Your Highness. Regarding the performance of this car, we are confident in claiming that it is the most powerful in the world. But the bad news is that the cost of this car is too expensive. I'm afraid it's impossible to popularize the market with it. Ben smiled sheepishly and explained to Arthur, this was the case with the Victor Dea car developed by Benz before. Although it was definitely one of the most advanced cars at the time in terms of performance, its high cost made it beyond the reach of most people. First update, please support. Chapter 84 Assembly Line Production and Automobile Testing, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arthur was dumbfounded. He had forgotten that cars are all handmade now. The relative labor cost and time cost will make the car very expensive. The price of relatively ordinary cars on the market is generally as high as hundreds of pounds, and the price of a car with relatively advanced performance like the Victor Dea is nearly £200. A car costs much more than that. Because every part of a hand-built car has major or minor differences, this also leads to a significant increase in the cost and time of repairing the car. Precisely because it is handmade, the stability of the car is not very good, and problems may even occur every 3 days. Due to various factors, the cost of a car is far more than the selling price. This is also the reason why the potential of automobiles has far exceeded that of horse-drawn carriages, but it is still not popular all over the world. Mr. Benz, I know a new way of car production that may be able to solve the problems of car production cost and construction time. Arthur looked at the two people who looked disappointed and said with a smile. Really? Your Highness, what is the method? Sure enough, the two people who were still in a low mood suddenly became energetic and asked Arthur impatiently. Both of you, your current production method is to have a team build a car together, right? Arthur did not answer directly, but asked his own question. Of course, Your Highness. Only when several workers who are familiar with each other form a team to build a car together, with the blessing of tacit understanding, can the production time and error rate of the car be reduced. Benz nodded matter-of-factly and answered Road. So, why don't we try to take apart a complete car? Arthur asked with a smile. A complete car can be split into multiple parts, doors, wheels, body, engine, etc. Wait for the module. Each person is only responsible for one part of it, just like running water, from one end of the production line to the other. Isn't it good to complete the assembly of a car bit by bit? Because there is no concept of assembly line production yet, Arthur can only use specific descriptions to summarize this statement, but it was obvious that both men quickly grasped the assembly line method and were frowning as they considered its role and advantages. Split a complete car into many modules. Benz frowned and thought. After a while, Benz looked at Diesel with excitement, and saw the equally excited Diesel giving the same look. Gaze. If one person only completes one module, it will not only increase the speed of car assembly, but also reduce the error rate in parts production and car assembly. My God, Your Highness, this is really a genius idea. Thank you, this idea is completely. It can save the automobile market, and it can even be transferred to other industries. Ben said to Arthur with excitement, this is indeed the case. The assembly line production technology invented by Ford has been applied to all walks of life. The discovery of this technology also greatly increased the production speed of the machinery industry. It not only promoted the popularization of automobiles and market expansion, but also made huge contributions to other industries around the world. If possible, I hope that the automobile factory can be modified according to this theory. If the assembly line production method can be used to speed up the production of automobiles and reduce the cost of automobiles, then our automobile factory will be the leader in developing the world's automobile market. Arthur nodded slightly and said with a smile, it is obvious that both Benz and Diesel have been attracted by the assembly line theory proposed by Arthur. If the experiment on the new car had not been completed, the two of them might have been eager to start the renovation of the factory. However, expectations are expectations, and the experiments that new cars should not be missed. It is the culmination of Benz and Diesel's existing knowledge and is arguably the most advanced car in the world. The two are still very confident about the experiment of new cars. The current vehicle inspection technology is also relatively rudimentary. It mainly tests the maximum speed and stability of the vehicle at a constant speed, as well as the failure rate on some more complex road sections. In terms of speed, due to the use of a powerful diesel engine, the top speed of the new car is very satisfactory, and it can reach a terrifying speed of more than 80 and nearly 90 kilometers. The figures obtained for constant speed driving are also very attractive. The new car is fully capable of driving at a speed of 40 kilometers per hour until the fuel tank is empty, a process that takes more than 7 hours. Although this number is nothing compared to the cars of later generations, at the stage when cars were just born, this was a number that no one could dare to imagine. The most commonly used small means of transportation in Europe is still horse-drawn carriages. The average speed of a horse-drawn carriage is only a dozen kilometers. Any faster will cause severe bumps and even vehicle crashes and deaths. The speed of cars born now is generally in the range of 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. First, cars are still in the exploratory stage, and most people are not familiar with this emerging thing. This also leads to a reduction in car speed in disguise, because most people cannot adapt to excessive speeds. Secondly, the frequent failure rate of existing cars also means that the car cannot drive too fast. There are often times when the car's fuel tank is less than half full, and the car has already broken down and cannot move. Against this background, the car developed by Benz and Diesel can have a maximum speed of nearly 90 kilometers and can travel at a constant speed of 40 kilometers per hour for nearly 7 hours, throwing away the production cost and construction time. The performance of such a car can be fully put into the market, and even the Model T car will not compromise on its performance. After reading the first two speed tests, Arthur, Benz, and Diesel were very satisfied. As for the subsequent stability and failure rate tests, since they require long-term testing on different road sections, they can only be conducted on another day. But based on the first two tests alone, the performance of the new car is fully qualified and meets Arthur's expectations for cars of this era. Now it depends on whether Benz and Diesel can successfully master the theory of assembly lines and reconstruct their respective factories. Once the transformation is completed, Arthur's car will be one step ahead of the Model T, laying out and planning the world's automobile market in advance. Thinking of this, Arthur looked at Diesel and Benz and said with a smile, "Mr. Diesel, Mr. Benz, I am very satisfied with this car. I hope you can work out a specific assembly line production method as soon as possible. Renovate your factory. Once you can successfully reduce the production cost and construction time of cars, you will all be Australia's heroes." Second update, please support. There will be another update tonight, please support me. Chapter 85 Diplomatic Mission from the Kingdom of the Netherlands, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time passed by and soon came to June of 1901, after waiting hard for several months, Arthur thought there was no hope of purchasing immigrants from the Netherlands, but what was unexpected was that the Dutch fleet quietly arrived in Australian waters from the Dutch East Indies. If the Dutch fleet had not used semaphore to indicate its intention early in the morning, the Australian Navy would have really thought that an invader was coming. The leaders of the Dutch fleet were Herbert von, the Dutch Foreign Minister, and Wilhelm Rasborn, the Governor-General of the Dutch East Indies. Accompanying her was a more distinguished guest, the mother of Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands and Queen Emma of the late King William III. The reason why Queen Emma has a distinguished status is that in addition to being the mother of the current Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, she was also the former regent of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Arthur was very surprised to receive this news, and then ordered Prime Minister Evan to go to greet him immediately. At the same time, someone prepared a welcome banquet, and invited his mother, Princess Louise, to attend and used the same status to entertain the Queen Mother Emma. Soon, Prime Minister Evan invited the Queen Mother Emma, Minister Helbert and Governor William to the manor. As the first official residence of Arthur and the royal family, this small manor also replaced almost all functions of the palace. It could not only hold temporary cabinet meetings, but also hold banquets to entertain guests. At the banquet, Arthur finally met the Queen Mother Emma, as well as the Dutch Foreign Minister Herbert and Governor William. It can be clearly seen that the long sea journey has brought several people to a state of exhaustion. Governor William is fine, Queen Mother Emma is still Minister Herbert, but both of them are not in a good mental state. The banquet was divided into two main bodies. Queen Mother Emma and Princess Louise stayed aside, followed by two naughty guys, Marjorie and Patricia. On the other side of the banquet, Minister Herbert and Governor William were talking seriously about international affairs with Prime Minister Evan, without forgetting their identities. This also made Arthur feel awkward sitting in the middle. His identity was a bit inappropriate to participate in both conversations, so he could only find a suitable time to exit. This also caused Arthur to be unclear about the conversations between the two parties. Prime Minister Evan was fine. All important matters discussed needed to be reported to Arthur, but things are different here with Princess Louise. The topic between women is not something that Arthur can participate in, and it is definitely not something that Arthur can know about. However, it can be seen from the expressions of the two people after the conversation that the two people were very happy with each other's conversation. The two people with similar identities and circumstances had some words and felt quite close to each other. After the banquet, Queen Mother Emma was arranged to live in the manor, while Minister Herbert and Governor William stayed in the best hotel in Australia, although it is just a few independent apartments converted into a hotel to entertain important guests. Because the guests received are almost all princes, nobles and dignitaries. The decoration in the hotel is also very luxurious, and it also has hot springs, fountains, gardens and private meetings room, office. After letting several people rest for a full day, Arthur invited Minister Herbert and Governor William to attend the meeting in the afternoon of the next day. After all, the fact that the Netherlands can send such a grand diplomatic mission means that there must be important things to discuss. Although Prime Minister Evan, Minister Herbert and Governor William seemed to be having a good time at last night's banquet, these old political foxes would not reveal their true purpose at a small banquet. In the conference room of the government building, Arthur met Minister Herbert and Governor William again. After a long rest, the mental state of the two men improved significantly. Governor William, in particular, has swept away his previous fatigue and is in excellent spirits. His Royal Highness the Duke of Australia. When the two saw Arthur, they immediately saluted respectfully. Arthur was stunned. He didn't expect that two senior officials from the Kingdom of the Netherlands would respect him so much. But he reacted quickly and nodded to the two of them with a smile. Minister Herbert, Governor William. I wonder what the important thing is for your government to send you here. If it is for the purchase of immigrants plan we proposed before, you only need to send us a transoceanic telegram. There is no need to go to such trouble. At the conference table, Prime Minister Evan asked Minister Herbert and Governor William with a smile. A diplomatic visit team composed of a cabinet minister and a feudal official, coupled with the blessing of the country's Queen Mother, was equivalent to a formal diplomatic visit to any country. But here's what's surprising. Although the Netherlands and Australia do not have any hatred or disputes, similarly, the Netherlands and Australia do not have any common interests or good relations. Australia even has a certain competitive relationship with the Netherlands in Southeast Asia. Although the relationship between the two countries cannot be said to be bad, it is definitely not very friendly. On this basis, the Netherlands quietly sent an extremely formal diplomatic visit team. The purpose of this visit left everyone confused. Your Highness, Prime Minister Evan, and all your lords. Please rest assured that Governor William and I only aim to achieve a good cooperative relationship with Australia. After the government and Her Majesty the Queen learned of Australia's plan, they quickly agreed to your country's purchase immigration plan. We are happy to help Australia purchase immigrants and are willing to reach a treaty to this end. Minister Helbert stood up and said very sincerely. Seeing that Minister Helbert was very sincere, Arthur also fell silent. Although it seems strange that the Kingdom of the Netherlands would mobilize for such a small matter, it would not do any harm to Australia after all, so the meeting continued. In that case, Minister Helbert, I wonder how many immigrants your government is willing to sell to us every year. What is the selling price of each immigrant? What about the capture, transportation, and handling of international affairs of immigrants? Prime Minister Evan he nodded and continued to ask. Buying immigrants is not as simple as it sounds. To transport immigrants from the Dutch East Indies to Australia, not only must they be captured with great effort, but they must also be successfully transported as quietly as possible. The manpower and material resources consumed are not high. For Australia, which has very few soldiers and warships, there is no extra force to capture the indigenous people and then transport them to Australia. We are willing to take on the work of capturing and transporting the indigenous people. Minister Helbert said with a smile, we can transport it to any port in Australia, you only need to be responsible for receiving it. Third update, please support. Chapter 86 Non-Aggression Pact, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arthur and all Australian officials fell silent. Unexpectedly, the Dutch government compromised on what was probably the most controversial topic in the negotiations to purchase BusinessManagement so simply. This also means that the most difficult part of purchasing indigenous people, that is, suppressing indigenous resistance, will be borne by the Dutch government. There was even a brief silence in the scene, until Arthur coughed lightly and then gradually recovered. Prime Minister Evan asked with some disbelief, Minister Herbert, are you sure that the Dutch government will undertake all the work of capturing and transporting indigenous people? That a native is not worth much, and even if there are thousands of natives, their value will not exceed £100,000. For tens of thousands of pounds, the army was dispatched to capture and transport the indigenous people. What are the benefits to the Netherlands? Even if each indigenous person can get £10 of funds, it will only be a loss for the Dutch government. If they want to earn a lot of money from Turkey-China trade, I am afraid that the expenditure on dispatching troops and fleets will not be a small amount. Of course, Minister Evan. We are very sincere about Australia's cooperation with us. If your government is worried, we can also sign a treaty with clear terms to confirm this cooperation. Minister Helbert nodded naturally. Said with a smile, seeing Minister Helbert say this, even though everyone still felt a little strange, they still felt relieved. After signing the treaty, even if the Kingdom of the Netherlands wants to renege in the future, it will depend on whether the Australian government agrees. Even if the Kingdom of the Netherlands wants to go back on its word in the future, it will directly give Australia an excuse. It can take this opportunity to seek more Southeast Asian islands, and even get involved in the Dutch East Indies and occupy some areas of great interest. Of course, in addition to signing a treaty to sell the natives, the Dutch government and the Dutch East Indies government represented by Governor William want to sign a friendly non-aggression treaty with your government and the Australian New Guinea government. The market in East India can also be used partially open to Australia. I think Australia and the Netherlands currently do not have any conflicts in their homeland or colonies. They can also rely on their current good relations to sign representative non-aggression treaties and mutual trade treaties. Herbert the minister changed the subject and continued, ever since Queen Victoria handed over the ownership of New Guinea and control of New Zealand to Arthur, Australia has had the tendency to unify Oceania and has posed considerable danger to Southeast Asia to the north. An Australia without any risk of foreign enemies and very close to Southeast Asia is not good news for all East Indian indigenous and colonial countries. Fortunately, the British Empire and Germany are not only the first and second largest powers in the world, but they also have good relations and connections with Australia. France also has its own colonies in Southeast Asia, but its colonies are Vietnam and Laos, which are relatively far away from Australia. As a result, the only country that has extremely important colonies, and the colonies are relatively close to Australia, and has no relationship with Australia, is the Netherlands. Although Portugal also owns Portuguese Timor not far north of Australia, this land has a small population and a small area, so it is not that important to Portugal. But the Netherlands is different. The Kingdom of the Netherlands, once known as the Coachman of the Sea, can now only stay on its own land and survive. The fleet that dominated the country for a while had already been defeated by Britain. The current navy can only be regarded as second-rate in Europe and can only barely defend its colonies. Of course, this is under the premise that other powers have no idea about the Dutch East Indies, although in terms of apparent strength and national strength, the Kingdom of the Netherlands can be considered a skinny camel that is bigger than a horse. It is still very powerful compared to Australia, but because the Netherlands is far away in Europe, it will take at least a month to get from the Netherlands to Batavia, the capital of the Dutch East Indies. As for Australia, it only takes a week at most to get from Sydney, the capital, to Batavia. The huge gap in distance represents a huge gap in logistics. If Australia really wants to seize the Dutch East Indies, it is really hard to say whether the Netherlands can hold on without interference from other powers. The reason why the Netherlands was able to hold on to its colonies before was because the British Empire did not allow other powers to occupy such a large area of land in Southeast Asia, but Australia is different. First of all, Australia is not a great power, and even its comprehensive national strength can barely be regarded as a third-rate European country. Moreover, Australia and the British Empire have a very deep relationship, and the Australian monarch Arthur was favoured by the former Queen Victoria of the British Empire. Moreover, Australia also has a good relationship with the German Empire. There were rumours that the two countries had reached a support treaty. Due to various factors, the Dutch government generally feels that it must take the initiative to sign a non-aggression treaty with Australia in order to better ensure the security of the Dutch East Indies. The status of the Dutch East Indies can be compared with the status of real India and the British Empire. If the British Empire, which had lost India, could not retain its position as the world's #1 power, then the Netherlands, which had lost the Dutch East Indies, would have completely become a third-rate or even inferior country in Europe. After hearing what Minister Helbert said, Prime Minister Evan looked at Arthur. He knew very well that such an important matter as signing a treaty between countries was definitely not his decision. Only after Arthur nodded could he express his opinion. In other words, he was conveying Arthur's opinions on his behalf. Prime Minister Evan looked around and saw Arthur nodding slightly, then turned around and said to Minister Herbert and Governor William, "Australia is an emerging country. The national defense we have is the power cannot even completely defend the homeland, but we also maintain good expectations for peaceful development. Australia is willing to sign a non-aggression treaty with the Dutch government, and this treaty can also be extended to our respective colonies. We are willing to maintain peaceful development in Southeast Asia and will work hard to maintain the current peaceful state." Minister Helbert will not believe Prime Minister Evans' nonsense, but Minister Herbert is still happy to see Australia willing to sign a treaty. "That's really good news, Prime Minister Evan. If possible, we also invite your government to send a diplomatic mission to the Netherlands and send ambassadors to each other. At that time, under the witness of our monarchs, we will sign an agreement for the two countries. They all have far-reaching non-aggression pacts," Minister Herbert said with a smile. First update, please support. Chapter 87 Marriage, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For most countries in the world, the first step in maintaining good relations is to send ambassadors to each other and establish their own embassy. For Australia, although it has already successfully achieved independence, because Arthur wanted to keep a low profile and have a good relationship with Queen Victoria, Australia did not send ambassadors to various countries extensively. Even except for the United Kingdom and Germany, Australia did not. There are no connections with other countries. After hearing Minister Herbert's proposal to send ambassadors to each other, Arthur remembered that Australia's presence in Europe was a bit low, and it should indeed have embassies in some important countries to better arrange Arthur and Australia's plan. Thinking of this, Arthur stood up directly, smiled and said to Minister Herbert, "That's right, Minister Herbert. We should send ambassadors to effectively implement the treaty we are about to sign, and to provide services for both of us. I will carefully consider the choice of ambassador and then inform your government. I look forward to the lasting friendship between Australia and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Minister Helbert was a little surprised and delighted to hear Arthur's direct decision. Various details of the meeting have shown Minister Herbert that Australian officials, including Prime Minister Evan, do not have control of the government. The mysterious Duke in front of him is the real master of Australia. Minister Helbert was secretly happy to hear Arthur's direct affirmation and agreement. After this matter was accomplished, he and Governor William had completed most of their mission to Australia. The remaining tasks depend on the performance of Queen Mother Emma. But no matter what, the remaining things are definitely not something that the two of them can participate in. Being able to handle their affairs well has already satisfied Minister Herbert. If Minister Herbert knew that the purpose of Arthur's agreement to exchange ambassadors was to establish an intelligence station and spy department in Europe, Minister Herbert would probably flip the table in anger. Later, Minister Herbert and Governor William had detailed discussions with Australian officials on the number of indigenous people purchased each year, how to transport them, and where to transport them. The price and conditions of each indigenous people were also discussed. Inside, I don't know why, but Minister Herbert, who is the plenipotentiary representative of the Dutch government, has always maintained a humble attitude during this discussion. He has also been accommodating many hot issues that should have been argued, and even directly chose to give in. Even on the more important issue of price, Minister Herbert directly agreed to the price of £5 per native proposed by Prime Minister Evan, under the premise that the Dutch government needs to send out troops to capture these indigenous people and use fleets to transport these indigenous people. The price of £5 even made Arthur suspect that the Netherlands was doing a loss-making business. However, Arthur is neither the monarch of the Netherlands nor has anything to do with the Netherlands. Since the Netherlands agrees to the price, Arthur naturally has no objections. It was precisely because of the concession from the Netherlands that the entire negotiation process went very smoothly, even taking just over an hour. Arthur and Prime Minister Evan originally thought that this would be a discussion that would take a whole day or even several days, but they did not expect that it would be completed in just over an hour. If Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands had not been present, I am afraid that this treaty could have been signed and implemented that day. Although Arthur and all Australian officials were dumbfounded by the repeated concessions and compromises of the Dutch government and Minister Herbert, it was a good thing for Australia, and everyone only thought that the Dutch were stupid and rich. The successful completion of the plan to purchase the indigenous people made many Australian officials, including the Minister of Industry, smile. After the treaty is implemented, at least 50,000 indigenous people will be transported to Australia every year to become slaves. This is a strong source of labor for Australia's industrial development and various economic constructions, and it is also a guarantee for Australia to carry out large-scale construction. In the previous industrial development, some more dangerous tasks were often carried out cautiously. Although this effectively reduced casualties, it was a major drag on the process of industrial construction. After having these natives, all the dangerous and thankless work can be done by these natives. All tasks can be completed very efficiently without delaying progress. Except for the death of some natives, this situation can be said to be a happy one for everyone. Of course, no one cares if some indigenous people die. Hundreds of thousands or even millions of indigenous people die every year in European colonies. Who can guarantee that these indigenous people die normally? After the plan was negotiated, Minister Herbert and Governor William spent 2 days in Sydney as guests, and then gathered with the reluctant Queen Mother Emma and embarked on a warship heading north to the Dutch East Indies. The Queen Mother Emma seemed really reluctant to leave. The chats with Princess Louise in the past 2 days made the Queen Mother Emma very happy. If the two ministers had not urged her to return, the Queen Mother Emma would have planned to stay for a few more days. After seeing off the Dutch diplomatic delegation, Arthur returned to the manor relaxedly. With enough development funds, most industrial equipment can be purchased from Britain and Germany, and the thorny problem of labor shortage can also be solved. It can be said that there is currently no obstacle to Australia's industrial development. With the help of German experts, Arthur may be surprised by the growth rate next year. Back at the manor, Arthur met the happy-looking Princess Louise and her two sisters. Since Duke Arthur was assassinated, Princess Louise has lost many smiles on her face. This was the first time Arthur had seen Princess Louise smile recently. He was very curious. He walked up and gently touched the foreheads of his two sisters, and then asked, "Mother, you seem to be in a good mood recently." Before Princess Louise could answer, the two sisters rushed to answer, "Yes, brother. Don't you know yet? Mother is going to work with the woman from before to arrange a marriage for you, brother." That the woman before was naturally the Queen Mother Emma who had left. "Marry yourself." Arthur was stunned for a while. He had been so busy with government affairs that he forgot that he was already 18 years old, which was a good age for Western nobles to get engaged. But who is Queen Mother Emma? As the second wife of the former King of the Netherlands, the relationship between Queen Mother Emma and the established Dutch aristocrats is not that good. Who could Queen Mother Emma recommend as Arthur's betrothed? It can't be her daughter Queen Wilhelmina. Second update, please support. Chapter 88 Queen Wilhelmina, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arthur looked at Princess Louise with a surprised look on her face. Princess Louise's face was full of smiles and she said happily, "The Queen Mother Emma and I had a great time chatting. We all agreed that you and Arthur Queen Wilhelmina has a very similar experience. Arthur, this is how noble marriages are. I think the Kingdom of the Netherlands can be a strong support for you, and your marriage to Queen Wilhelmina is quite good." After saying that, Princess Louise was worried that Arthur might not be able to accept it for a while, and added, "Although I really hope to achieve this marriage, the final choice is still yours, Arthur. I support your final decision, and no matter what, I hope you can make a choice that follows your heart." Indeed, as Princess Louise said, most marriages between Western nobles are political marriages. Many nobles did not even meet their marriage partner several times before getting married, and they got together just because of the approval of their parents and elders. Arthur is already in a relatively good situation. The closest relatives, Duke Arthur and Queen Victoria, passed away one after another, leaving only Princess Louise who could influence Arthur's marriage. Even Arthur was able to follow his own ideas to a large extent and did not have to face the embarrassing situation of getting engaged without meeting his fiancée. So the question is, what does Arthur think? Arthur has been busy with government affairs, so Arthur really didn't think about this issue. Even when the Queen Mother Emma came to visit, Arthur always thought it was just a normal diplomatic visit from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Suddenly faced with the important matter of his marriage, Arthur was at a loss for a moment, and for the first time he showed the immaturity and confusion that he should have at his age. "Mother, there is no need to go so early. Australia is currently in its golden period of development. I think my marriage can be postponed until 3 or 4 years later," Arthur said with some embarrassment. "Theoretically, there is no rush, Arthur. But as time goes by, it will not be easy to find a suitable marriage partner like Queen Wilhelmina, Arthur. After all, Australia is still too far away from Europe. In the future, you can't find a local civilian, Arthur." Princess Louise persuaded her earnestly. Although Arthur was born into a well-established British royal family, he was the Duke of a remote principality. Although it is not difficult to find a well-matched marriage partner in Europe, it is rare to find a marriage partner like Queen Wilhelmina, who has the legitimate title of queen and controls a second-rate European country. More importantly, if Arthur can really get engaged to Queen Wilhelmina, then the Kingdom of the Netherlands will also become a marriage country with the Principality of Australia. Arthur will become Prince of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and Queen Wilhelmina will become the Duchess of the Principality of Australia. This kind of marriage between the supreme heads of state is often accompanied by the birth of the United Federation and the Co-President Federation. The first descendant of Arthur and Queen Wilhelmina will become the legal heir to the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Principality of Australia. Of course, there is another factor that can make the common federation and the unified union come faster. That is, on the premise that Queen Wilhelmina is willing to rule the Netherlands with Arthur, Arthur will have the opportunity to fight for the title of king by the Dutch Parliament. Only then did Arthur understand why Minister Herbert was so humble during discussions, and why he was so respectful when facing him. Everyone knows that Queen Emma and Princess Louise are discussing the marriage of Queen Wilhelmina and Arthur. Once the matter is settled, Arthur will at least become the Prince of the Netherlands and face his future monarch spouse. No wonder how could Minister Herbert have such respect for a foreign monarch like Arthur. After thinking about it, getting married in the Netherlands is indeed a good choice. Through its marriage relationship with the Netherlands, Australia can also have a certain degree of mobility in Europe, and the deployment of certain operations in Europe will be smoother. At the same time, the relationship with the Dutch East Indies will also become allies. The various resources and manpower of the Dutch East Indies can also be easily mobilized. Not only can it develop Australia more easily, but it can also unite with the Dutch East Indies and have considerable influence in Southeast Asia. Even thinking about it carefully, this marriage has no disadvantages for Australia, except for restricting Arthur's freedom of marriage. Another advantage is that you can seek higher-level titles. Europe attaches great importance to the concept of legal principles, and it is generally very difficult for Arthur, who was born in the British royal family, to advance to become king, unless Australia, New Guinea and New Zealand can be completely integrated, and Australia can be developed into an entity that is not weaker than Italy and Spain. Can it be qualified to be promoted to a kingdom? Of course. This does not mean that it is justified. Such a king would not be recognized by most of the great powers. Unless he had the power to be recognized by the great powers, he would always be a king with an unfair reputation. Arthur had a headache. In theory, the benefits of marrying the Netherlands far outweighed the disadvantages, but the problem is that Arthur has never met Queen Wilhelmina and even knows little about this legendary queen. Under such circumstances, it is really unacceptable to directly agree to be engaged to Queen Wilhelmina. Arthur could only answer vaguely, "Let me think about it, mother. I have never met Queen Wilhelmina, and it is a bit arbitrary to make a decision now. Wait until Australia and the Kingdom of the Netherlands establish normal diplomatic relations." Princess Louise nodded and took Arthur's evasive words as an embarrassed answer. After all, many European aristocrats are like this. Before they know the person they are engaged to, most people can only give such ambiguous answers, neither reject nor agree. Marriage matters of nobles need to be cautious, especially when both parties are the monarchs of a country. Seeing that Princess Louise no longer persuaded Arthur, Arthur breathed a sigh of relief. After chatting happily with his two sisters for a while, Arthur returned to his room. I originally thought that the engagement was over for the time being, but unexpectedly, just a few minutes later, Princess Louise sent someone several photos and portraits of Queen Wilhelmina, as well as Queen Wilhelmina's deeds and some brief introductions. Looking at the black and white photos taken with a relatively simple camera, Arthur actually felt that the people in the photos were somewhat good-looking. Shaking his head and discarding other thoughts in his mind, Arthur looked at Queen Wilhelmina's introduction, but in his mind was Wilhelmina's original deeds and history. Third update, please support. I see many brothers are still talking about the update problem. I am dealing with a severe cold and cough and I have to update it 3 times a day. It is not easy. After I get better, I will definitely try to update it 4 times or even 10,000 times a day. I just ask my brothers for their support. The author is grateful. Chapter 89 Time Development and Industrial Railways. Please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Queen Wilhelmina, whose full name is Wilhelmina Helena Paulina Maria, became Queen of the Netherlands in 1890 and remains today. However, Queen Wilhelmina actually ascended the throne on September 6, 1898, and she truly held power for less than 3 years. The Netherlands has established a complete constitutional monarchy and parliamentary system. The Dutch monarch has very few rights, and most of the time it is just a false title without rights. Queen Wilhelmina originally ruled the Netherlands for 50 years, the longest among all Dutch kings and queens. During her tenure, Queen Wilhelmina respected the Dutch constitutional monarchy and parliamentary system, and tried her best to balance the opposition between the Counter-Revolutionary Party, the Liberal Party and the Socialist Party. During Queen Wilhelmina's reign, she experienced very important historical turning points for the Netherlands and the world, namely World War I, World War II, the economic crisis in 1933, and the independence of the Dutch colonies. Various deeds have also made Queen Wilhelmina one of the more legendary queens of the Netherlands, deeply loved by the Dutch people. Of course, the current Queen Wilhelmina has just officially ascended the throne for less than 3 years, and is still very immature in politics, and even the original historical marriage has not happened. perhaps it was because Arthur was a butterfly flapping its wings that Queen Mother Emma actually decided to marry Arthur, and even went to Australia in person to negotiate the marriage with Princess Louise. Thinking about this, Arthur was a little silent. Since marriage with the Kingdom of the Netherlands has no disadvantages for Australia, it also has many benefits for Arthur, so, getting engaged to Wilhelmina seems like a good choice. As he thought about it, Arthur's mind began to feel heavy and he fell into sleep unconsciously. It will take some time for the Aboriginal purchase plan with the Netherlands to be implemented, but the Aboriginal transportation plan for Australia's own New Guinea colony has been implemented for a long time, since Arthur issued the order. Governor Annibal began to have people study the specific implementation method of the plan. He only waited for the arrival of the troops promised by Arthur and immediately launched the indigenous capture plan. Arthur also acted quickly. In less than a month, an army of 2,000 men set off and arrived in New Guinea. This will be a painful past for the indigenous people of New Guinea, if they can retain a few fires, but for Australia, the Industrial Development Plan can inject fresh vitality and ensure the flourishing development of the country's various industries without harming the interests of Australians. Starting from July 1901, at least 5,000 indigenous people were reluctantly transported to Australia every month. Under the oppression of soldiers and put into production and construction in various industries, they face dangerous work that makes Australians uncomfortable, and they may even lose their lives if they are not careful. Of course, they are also paid handsomely. The black bread and wheat paste carefully made by the logistics department, paired with the clear soup made from unknown vegetables, are the hearty dishes of every native. If placed in Germany after World War I, these indigenous foods would probably be worth at least millions of marks. Arthur felt that he had been very kind to them. Not only did he spend a lot of money to provide them with food, but he also allowed them to work only 14 hours a day and rest during the rest of the time. He was simply the most charitable entrepreneur of our time. Of course, I don't know what the natives thought of Arthur. However, since a few nonsense-talking Aboriginals were shot on the spot, it is obvious that the Aboriginals treat the Australians around them with less hatred, and more fear and submission. Industry Minister Pierre and Transport Minister Connaught are smiling the brightest these days. With the addition of sufficient indigenous manpower, the most obvious changes can be felt in the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Transport. These two departments require a lot of manpower. Without lack of funds, equipment and materials, with the participation of these indigenous people, the construction of industrial zones and road construction are simply improving with each passing day. Not only are roads being renovated very quickly, but Sydney's urban reconstruction project, which was originally planned to take at least several years to prepare, has been put on the agenda, and the revision of urban planning is already in full swing. For Australians, they are also used to seeing these Aboriginal figures in many places where they work. Although most of them are separated by barbed wire and walls, the figures of the indigenous people can still be seen very clearly. Most Australians smiled proudly when they saw the indigenous people being requested to work by soldiers with guns. Don't be surprised, this is actually the norm in modern European society. A country that does not oppress colonial races will be looked down upon by other countries. In summary, the rise of Europe is a history of blood and tears of oppression. Australia, like Australia, can transfer the bloody oppression to the outside world, especially the indigenous people, which is very satisfying to these Australians. Australian people are also becoming more and more respectful and enthusiastic about Arthur. If pollsters existed now, Arthur's approval rating would be at least 99%, it is not surprising that it has not reached 100%. After all, every country has some talents with strange ideas. All Arthur needs to ensure is that the vast majority of normal people respect and love his rule. After surveying Australia's mineral resources and geographical environment, German industrial experts couldn't help but marvel at Australia's industrial development potential. Previously, there were manpower limitations. After sufficient indigenous people join, Australia's industrial development is like a wild horse that is running wild and is about to take off. In order to ensure the supply of various resources in the industrial zone and the safety of the industrial zone, Arthur, based on the original roads in the industrial zone, it is planned to build a railway from Western Australia across the 5 states of South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, and name it the Industrial Railway. Starting from the industrial area in the west, passing through Perth, the capital of Western Australia, Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, Melbourne, the capital of Victoria, Sydney, the capital of New South Wales, all the way to Brisbane, the capital of Queensland. Class, if this railway can be built, it will be able to connect the 5 existing states on the Australian continent and accelerate the economic development of southern Australia. However, the total length of this railway is more than 4,000 kilometers, and it is not a task that can be completed in a few years, according to conservative estimates by German experts. The construction of this railway will take at least 10 years and require an annual investment of at least £2 million. First update, please support. Slightly accelerated, this book is expected to be supported by everyone after World War II. It has been in 1901 water. Chapter 90 Railway Construction, please subscribe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The construction of railways requires huge funds, manpower and material resources, which is why Arthur has not built railways before. Australia's finances are very wealthy, and the royal family also has a lot of spare funds. If it were not for insufficient steel production and scarcity of manpower, the plan to build the railway would have started long ago. However, it is not too late to start now, just in time to complete the construction of the railway before the start of World War I and speed up Australia's nationwide mobilisation capabilities. The good news is that Australia did not build railways during the colonial period, although it was only a simple railway built independently by the colony to transport minerals. Some sections of these railways can also be included in the planning scope of industrial railways and can continue to be put into use with slight modifications. These railways can also speed up the construction time of Australian industrial railways, while also saving some money and material resources. In terms of manpower, Arthur is not lacking. After possessing the indigenous people of New Guinea and the Dutch East Indies, Australia also has confidence in manpower. In various previous development plans, thousands of workers were involved, which was considered a huge scale, but now, all construction and development plans that do not have 5,000 people are small scale, and construction at the national level basically starts with 10,000 people. This is very effective in advancing the construction progress. Tasks that previously took several months to complete can now be basically completed in just 2 days. This not only saves Australia's capital investment to a great extent, but also reduces the casualty rate of Australians at work. After all the hard, tiring and dangerous jobs are done by indigenous people, and because Australia has a small population, there are still a large number of high-paying, easy jobs waiting for Australians. In August 1901, Arthur became busy. Not only because the railway negotiations are about to be completed and railway construction is about to begin, but also because of what Butler Hunter said before, the establishment of a global scientific research award. In order to manage the royal family's property more conveniently, Arthur ordered Butler Hunter to establish a royal consortium to accommodate all the assets of the royal family, and to be managed by Butler Hunter as a whole, including shipyards, armaments factories, 2 steel plants, the Crown Bank, all shares of private wineries and estates, and half of the shares of the Australian National University. £150 million lent to the government, and more than £100 million in cash. All of Arthur's existing property. Although Arthur's goal is not to become rich and powerful, he is not even interested in money, but his identity is doomed. His assets cannot be small and will only increase with time. The royal family's lack of involvement in many developments in Australia was one of the issues raised by Hunt Stewart. This has also been recognised and supported by Arthur. Hunter Butler will use at least £20 million of funds to deploy in all walks of life in Australia. Maybe it will be used to buy minerals, maybe it will be used to buy shares in other industries, maybe it will be used to create new factories and enterprises with the government. In short, increasing participation in some special industries is also a way for Arthur to stabilize and improve his reputation and power. When the monarch of a country controls most of the voice or share of important industries in the country, then he naturally controls many rights. This is equivalent to the combination of plutocrats and monarchs in later generations. One has actual rights and the other has nominal power. The combination of the two will create a ruler with real power comparable to the absolute monarchs in history. The Industrial Railway is a project invested by the Royal Consortium. Because it will take at least 10 years to build and cost at least £20 million, the construction of this railway will be jointly funded by the royal family and the government. The royal family invested £10 million, accounting for 49% of the shares, and the government invested £1.01 million, accounting for 51% of the shares. The shares only represent control rights. In fact, the profit sharing, that is, all future railway charges, is equally divided between the royal family and the government, and in addition to the initial investment, other additional costs will be borne by the government. This is an investment that both the government and the royal family are very happy with. The government can obtain control of the railway with only half of the funds, and can build the railway smoothly. The royal family could gain long-term benefits and a great prestige gain from funding the construction of the railway. Don't forget, in this era, building railways was also one of the signs of becoming an industrial country. Being able to build a railway that runs through Australia will not only speed up Australia's construction and economic development, but is also very important for enhancing Australia's national self-confidence and cohesion. The government and royal family that contribute the money will also gain great prestige, fame and fortune. On August 11, 1901, after the railway plan was negotiated, Arthur asked the newspaper to rush printing and distribute it to the whole country for free. The upcoming construction of a railway across Australia has also caused a sensation among all Australians. Some people even directly compared this unborn railway to the backbone of Australia and the hope for Australia's rise. As a result, the government and the royal family also gained a lot of popularity, especially Arthur. With the publicity of the Australian Daily and Victoria newspaper, Arthur's reputation in Australia reached its peak. Any news about Arthur will attract the attention of a large number of Australians. Robbery. This is a good thing for Arthur and Australia. The strength of a monarchy depends largely on the trust its people have in their monarch. Just imagine, when all the people and soldiers are no longer loyal to their monarch, will the country's army still have combat effectiveness? On the contrary, if all the people and soldiers of this country are fanatically loyal to the monarch, then this country will also erupt with terrible cohesion, which is far stronger and more violent than that of non-monarchy countries. Perhaps the only thing that can compare with this kind of cohesion is the religious forces that once dominated Europe for a long time. On September 1, 1901, with the laying of the first steel rail of the Industrial Railway in Sydney, the construction plan of the Industrial Railway officially began. The groundbreaking ceremony attracted tens of thousands of Australians to watch. People held homemade banners, most of which read "Long Live Industrial Railway." Long live His Royal Highness the Duke. At the same time, a fleet quietly set out from Sydney, bypassed the Tasman Sea, and turned around to head west. Second update, please support. 1901 was the year of transition and industrial development, and 1902 was the year of showing results. In addition, I plan to open a fan speech. If the fan value is greater than 1 point, you can comment. I don't know if you have any opinions, mainly for some advertisements.